Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Freedom to Formulate podcast. I'm your host, Michael Loomis. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Adriana Kekic. She is the CEO and founder of Futureome. And I love the tagline that she has, or kind of the mission, is empowering leaders to extend their health span with precision data and personalized interventions and not relying on guesswork. So, Dr. Kekic, I love what you're doing. Welcome to the show here today.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I cannot wait for us to have our chat.
Yeah, so I'm excited to dive into a lot of things. You have such a breadth of knowledge in terms of longevity and health span. I know you're doing a lot of really cool things, but I'd love to kind of start. It's always interesting hearing how people got into the space, right? There's so many different stories of how they got into longevity, what'd you say, functional medicine, root cause, aging. So yeah, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. I know, among other things, you spent 10 years at the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah, I sure did.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you go in a little bit about kind of your background at the Mayo Clinic, what you did there. Yeah, we can kind of start there.
Yeah, I love this question because it always makes me think, oh my gosh, what exactly have I done? How did I get here? So the short answer to that would be that I have both professional road and personal health journey road that kind of converged about 4 or 5, almost now really 5 years ago. And I'll start from that story and we can make our way back. But the short version of that is this. About 5 years ago, I nearly died from something that was preventable and it was missed. And when I say it was missed, I mean I missed my own symptoms, so I don't blame any of my medical team members. We all missed it, but I primarily missed my own symptoms because I was downplaying it. You know, as somebody who is on the go, high performer, I'm very used to this intensity. I just thought, oh, I'm just tired. And so I actually suffered massive settled pulmonary embolism, which for those of our listeners who may not know what that is, it's essentially having bunch of blood clots in your lungs. And they came just a month prior from an injury that I had in my knee. And so it has been a really rough journey for me since, because when I ended up in ICU with this that I had, it nearly killed me. I also was told that I had a number of either ongoing like pre-chronic conditions like pre-diabetes, but also full-on chronic cardiometabolic conditions like fatty liver disease and a few other things. So that really, first, the recovery took me out. I was out for 2 months and I was already in a very robust clinical practice. So I thought, oh my God, how am I going to leave my practice for 2 months? What is going to happen?
Yeah.
And really what happened was, well, the practice continued, obviously, without me. And this was while I was working as a pharmacogenomic clinical pharmacy specialist at the Mayo Clinic. What that means is I am a pharmacist trained in genetics, and that's what I did for the past, 10 years or so working at the Mayo Clinic. So I realized a couple of important things. I realized, number one, that unless you know what's going on truly under the hood, hopefully earlier on, before you end up dropping dead or before you end up with like diagnosis of heart disease, diabetes, whatever that is, autoimmune conditions, whatever that is for you, there is actually a way for you to really get engaged with your health and be at the driver's seat of your health, as opposed to continuously deferring that to usually very busy medical teams that we all have. And I have an amazing team of healthcare professionals who helped me along the way. They certainly have contributed to my recovery, full-on recovery. And the second thing, Michael, that I realized is, how the heck is this possible? How did this happen? Especially to somebody like me who's like really deep into this whole new world of medicine, not only personalized medicine or genomic medicine or genetic medicine, but also this universe that's called multi-omics. And so at Mayo Clinic, I had this enormous luck and privilege to work with many talented team members, from physicians, PhDs, engineers, where we started to bring together elements of the multi-omics. And what that means is system biology approach to health. So I think most of us have either heard or maybe had like genetic testing done. That is one layer of your overall biology, upon which there are other layers that will sit on, like genes and code for proteins, give instructions to make proteins. So there's a whole other layer that's called proteomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, which is inside of your metabolism, microbiome, and so on. And so this really kind of was a D-Day, if you will, for me. It was like a line that I drew in the sand to say, okay, stop, let me rethink this. Let me figure out what exactly happened in my body that almost resulted in me really losing my life. And in this process, I got 2 other degrees because I really just wanted to know. So my other degree is actually in nutrigenomics and nutrition because I realized, my gosh, I have gotten myself to this point by not taking care of myself and my body. So I guess
Yeah.
this is a long answer to your question that I said was going to be a short answer, but that was essentially my journey. And for the past 3 decades, I have existed in this world of what I refer to as cellular intelligence in action, the original CIA, which is cellular intelligence in action, which is essentially to say what I have studied for the past 3 decades is pharmacology, which is not just about, I don't know if you can hear that noise. I can hear a lot of noise coming into
Yeah,
the
I think
feed.
it's fine. Is it like I think it's like a white noise. So we can cut this
Right
part
noise. Okay.
obviously, but yeah, I think you should be fine to speak over it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what I was saying as far as pharmacology, it is not just about pills. Pharmacology is this whole other world of figuring out information. Everything is information, from the food to exercise to your thoughts to supplements to medications, environment, toxins. Everything is information. So what your body does to that information and what that information does to that body is actually what pharmacology truly studies.
That's really good. Yeah, it's cool that you took something that, for so many people could have just, you could say end their life, but just kind of put them into a negative spiral, that you use that as motivation to do what you're doing now, right? Like, so often purpose comes from pain. So it's really
Mm.
cool to hear that story. I'd heard it a little bit, but not that in depth. So thanks for sharing. So what did you find for yourself? Just kind of saying that, what were some of the main drivers for you that led to this situation that you ended yourself up in?
So I found out that just like many of my family members, I was in cardiometabolic storm. And what I mean with that, it's a silent one. So when I did my standard lab testing, this was some months before I actually ended up with a knee injury and then got a clean bill of health to have a surgery to operate on that knee and then ended up with blood clots in my lungs. So months before that, not too many months before that, I did standard blood testing, which unveiled that I'm pre-diabetic. I'm heading in that direction. And this is 2021. I call this is still in throes of COVID. I was working nonstop, 15, 16-hour days nonstop. And so I was really not taking care of myself. And I also not knowingly was in perimenopause. I had no idea that the reason that I was not sleeping well, I was sleeping like 2 to 3 hours at night, having a
Wow.
small kiddo at home. I honestly don't know how we function by putting
That's
our bodies.
unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like how does someone sleep 2 to 3 hours a night, work 15 to 16 hours? You would think we would be in a worse situation.
Yeah. I mean, truly, especially with founders and, folks, medical professionals often a lot, we tend to care of others more so than we take care of
Mm.
ourselves oftentimes. A lot of us absolutely love what we do, absolutely are dedicated and committed to what we do. And so I realized that obviously I have not taken care of myself, but I did not know the effect that stress and not exercising, not eating well, not supplementing correctly, not taking care of my mental health, and all of these elements have contributed to this enormous metabolic storm that was brewing underneath. And so my standard testing did not really reveal a whole lot other than to say, eat better and maybe
Yeah.
move more. When I did, eventually, as I kind of all of this happened and I started building and bringing multiomics layer to my own testing, to figuring out what my body is really trying to communicate, I realized, my God, I have this mosaic, like a puzzle pieces that are now starting to come together of my genetic predispositions, which were very clear, also of my microbiome gut changes that were major drivers to what was going on in terms of inflammation and blood clots and all of these other things. They were just ongoing contributors. And of course, the cardiometabolic storm means that, yeah, not only was my LDL somewhat elevated, but I had elevated ApoB, which is a
Oh, yeah.
lot more atherogenic particle. So for those of us who may not know what What am I saying? What is ApoB? Apolipoprotein B is essentially one of those particles, cholesterol carrying particle, let's put it that is a lot more indicative of your risk of really heart attacks and strokes and cardiovascular diseases because it causes more of that plaque buildup than just LDL alone. And more importantly, I had high fasting insulin and ongoing insulin resistance. Even though my A1C was kind of borderline-ish, so not significantly high, the other elements were really extraordinarily high.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You have conversations with people or people I love, family members, friends, where, oh yeah, my LDL was great, my HDL was in good range, but that tells such a small story. It honestly isn't really a great story that's being told, right? If you're just looking at those numbers, right? Like you mentioned the ApoB, other markers that actually show more risk than just like your normal LDL, HDL. So yeah, it's good. You obviously you figure that out, but a lot of people get put into situations like yourself without the right data, right? And I know you're a big data person, which is
Yes.
awesome. So I guess obviously you had a background in genetics, right? So you're working in the Mayo Clinic, you're working in genetics, but it seems like there were certain things that might have been missed even from with your background. So I guess from your perspective, like as you move deeper into this journey yourself and also clinically, like
Mhm.
with genomics and personalized medicine, like what limitations did you realize still existed even with the genetic data that you had been working with?
That is actually a very good question, Michael. So, what comes to mind are two things. And I mean, we can have a whole podcast series on this. I don't think, you
I'm
know,
sure.
a little
Yeah.
blimp of time is enough. But short
Yeah.
version of that are two things that come to mind. Number one is just because you have a genetic variant on something, we still really don't know. Is that clinically truly relevant or not?
Mhm.
So we have some really well established both mutations and genetic variants that we know are linked to disease predisposition, also pharmacogenomically, meaning if you have those variants, your body does not metabolize medications in that way that we would anticipate for general public, if you will, for all of
Mhm.
us. So we already know that there are elements there, but what we obviously don't know is number one, what all of these mutations or genetic variants truly mean. And number two, more data is not necessarily better. You
Mhm.
end up in that space of a lot of noise. And this is what I'm seeing actually with many of us who are trying to be really proactive about their health. Maybe they're data driven, so you're doing more advanced testing. You end up with a lot of biomarkers. And then the question is, now what? What does that
Yeah.
mean for me? And how does that change my course of like health span? And health span is number of years that you live healthy, essentially in good, vibrant health, physical, cognitive, emotional, spiritual, all of that. And so that those two things are basically what's driving some of this confusion. And of course, genetic testing is still not something that is routinely ordered. So most
Mm.
of us, even myself, I only after all of this that happened did I started doing deep dive into my
Mm.
own genetics, and I realized, well, besides my genetics, I have more acute things that are going on in my body that my body is signaling to me right now that I absolutely need to correct with or without those genetic predispositions.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. One thing you said where, you could do all this functional labs, all this biomarker testing. I know you mentioned this multiomics approach where you're looking at
Mhm.
genetics, you're looking at, hopefully I say this right, proteomics, you're looking at
Proteomics.
transcriptomics, you're looking at all these things. Like, how does someone or even a practitioner is like, I want to take this multiomics approach.
Yeah.
I want to have all this data, see the big picture. It seems like it can be a lot, right? Because that could be X amount of
Mhm.
tests. Like, how does one go about taking a multi-omics approach without overwhelming themselves and just having more data than what's needed?
So I struggled with this myself, and it's an ongoing struggle because the number of data points that we continue to generate just continues to mount. There is new technology popping up every day.
Yeah.
We have kind of exited that work. So trendy talk, let's have a trendy talk really quick, trendy
Yeah.
chat right now. So genomics is in a sunset. And that doesn't mean that genomics and genetics is not important. It is, very much so. It's just that we have shifted away from this big promise of gene information and storybook telling that comes from your genes.
Mhm.
And now have shifted more into, well, how are those genes expressed? Meaning, like, okay, what proteins are actually formed by your genetic information and also influence of the environment, internal and external environment that you live in. So what I'm trying to say there, yes, this is an era, like the 2026 is really going to be mostly all about proteomics. So you're going to start hearing more about proteomics. So it's an ongoing, really shared learning experience, which is what I recommend to all practitioners. Find reputable sources that you can engage with. So this is one of the reasons that I started writing on a Substack, because I know myself and my colleagues are looking for deep dives to understand multi-omics data points. How does that drive decision-making process, especially because there are no clinical guidelines for the most part. And how do we do medicine and pharmacy and all of this? Well, we rely on clinical guidelines. So we are still doing essentially, we are early champions and early adopters of all of this. And how do you do that? So the second thing that comes to mind is I would start with things that you know are likely going to move needle in the right direction. So it's going to be metabolomics, microbiome, perhaps some proteomic testing or biomarkers as well, especially related maybe to immune system, cardiometabolic health as well, perhaps some cancer types, and so on. How do you do that? Where do you go look for that information? There is not a collated university that will offer
Yeah, I
all of
know.
this for you. I know Mayo Clinic has some. I know that there are some longevity doctor societies that are putting all of this together. Some functional medicine are putting all of this together. Michael, the short version is there is no one-stop shop where you go and get yourself educated. So it's really
Yeah.
important, if you're an early adopter, that you identify the sources of people who are actually doing this. So clinicians, researchers, academics. One of the conferences that is my must or go to is the Buck Institute conference. Really, it's the research on aging. It's also Harvard's conference on biomarkers of aging, because you start to collate the knowledge and you start to connect with people and networks that are actually doing this in practice, which is what I care about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's kind of success 101, right? Of, how do
Yeah.
you truly learn something? Is you go find someone doing what you're doing or wanting to do or is doing something you're trying to learn and just go learn from them, right? So I think that's really
Mhm.
good advice. I want to kind of unpack a little bit more. You're talking about proteomics, right? 2026 is a year of proteomics, kind of moving away from necessarily straight only genetic talk and focus. So could you go a little bit more in depth about what proteomics is? And then I guess how does that now differ in approach compared to just the genetic approach that's kind of going into the sunset, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so genetic and proteomics, they are joined at hip, if you will. Think of it like this. Your genes, humans have over 20,000 genes. So your genes will give instructions to make proteins. And we are very focused on these functional proteins, those that constitute your body. And also, from my point of view, I am very focused on proteins that are involved with processes. So enzymes, primarily, they're involved in your metabolism. Really involved in every single cellular function there is. And with proteomics, we're now kind of shifting our approach in thinking to say, well, everything that's happening in human body can really be looked at in smaller universes of the cellular health. So proteomics, first of all, what it is, it's the study of all of the proteins in your body, what they are, where are they present, how they function, and how they actually communicate together. And so just to give you some examples. So why are proteins important? Well, they allow us to live. They carry oxygen. They repair our DNA. They're involved in signal moleculing, like cytokines, signal moleculing inside of your cells. They run your metabolism, like all of these enzymes that I'm talking about. They are involved in building your muscles and structure, like myosin, actin, and so on. They regulate your hormones. They obviously are very involved in driving immune responses. And so when I think about proteomics and proteins, why is that important? As much as we think of genetics as some sort of like a set of instructions or a book, I think people refer to it as a blueprint. I don't know that I really do. That's a discussion for another time. You can think of your proteomic umbrella, really proteins, as the machinery of life. because they will dictate not only what's happening right now, but what you can perhaps change and influence, like reduce the inflammation. There are some inflammatory proteins, maybe improve DNA repair system, improve metabolism, and so on. So all of this is really the power of proteomics, because proteomics allow us, especially advanced proteomics, and there are advanced proteomic platforms that you can use to measure inflammation, your cardiometabolic risk proteins, your growth factors, your immune aging markers, cancer-associated proteins, mitochondrial markers, which are incredibly important because mitochondria, as you probably very well know, mitochondria are engines inside of our cells that make energy, but do a lot more than just make energy.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my doctors I actually see personally is he was like, it's all about the mitochondria. He's like, if your mitochondria are humming, obviously it's a simplistic answer, but there's the
Yeah.
power of the mitochondria to even
Mm.
offset, genetic issues that might be happening, right? So does that play into also, I know we have like our genetics we get from mom and dad, right? So you get
Mhm.
your genetic code from your parents, and then there's also mitochondrial DNA, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Can you can you talk a little bit about, if you have a knowledge there, if not, it's fine,
Yeah.
but like the difference between mitochondrial DNA and how that interacts with just parental DNA?
How it interacts with parental, oh, I cannot obviously pronounce that, parental DNA, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. This is what I know about mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is, you get it, you inherit it only from your mom. Mitochondria, as I said, are these energy producing organelles inside of your cells. They do a lot more than just that, but I think that's what we're mostly focused on, especially when it comes to metabolism, disease predispositions, and so on. So mitochondrial DNA is very small and it looks very different than your regular DNA, nuclear DNA. So the nuclear DNA is essentially part of it you got from your mom, and the other part kind of combined you got from your dad. That's your nuclear DNA. Your every cell has that nuclear DNA. The mitochondrial DNA is very small and it's circular, and it contains set of genetic instructions that really have a lot to do with energy, metabolism, things that make us living alive. And so they are, if we think about proteins as these molecules of life, engines of life, then you can think of mitochondria as your energy factors. So they, therefore, mitochondrial DNA, or the genes there, and there is not a whole lot of them, they encode for incredibly critical proteins. And these proteins are going to empower energy making process. So electron transport chain, ATP production, which means energy production, also cellular energy efficiency. And if your DNA, mitochondrial DNA, is damaged or mutated, mostly what we see is damage as opposed to mutation, then you can have, and I see people all the time that will complain, oh my God, I have a brain fog, or I'm really tired, or I started a hormone replacement therapy, or maybe whatever that is, but I still feel quite tired. You'd usually see oxidative stress that rises and inflammation that increases. Plus, they are very much linked to accelerated cellular aging. So you can have set of instructions that you got in your nucleus that keeps you alive, but also you can have mutations there. But you also could have damage and mutations inside of your mitochondrial DNA. So hopefully
Yeah.
that answered some of it.
Yeah, thanks for answering that, because I think you see a lot of talk about just regular DNA, right? Parental DNA, but you don't get as much talk about the mitochondrial DNA and how
Yeah.
that also affects it. So how do you optimize it? Because, you can get, my mom had a lot of health issues growing
Whoa.
up and all that. And so obviously then that passed down the mitochondrial DNA, right? And so,
Yes.
then like how do you then optimize that, right? Because it's something that like how speak to that a little bit. So say, mom had a lot of health issues, right? So
Yeah.
probably someone has, she has poor mitochondrial health. You're the person who inherits that, right? So then what, like, can that be improved? Is that something
Yeah.
that can be optimized? Like, how does that work once you receive the DNA?
I have a wonderful colleague who is Dr. Weissig, Wolfgang Weissig from Midwestern University here in Glendale, in Arizona, who is one of the leading experts on mitochondria. This
Mm.
question would be an amazing question for him, Michael, and I'm happy to connect you with him. So here are my thoughts on what you said. Your nuclear DNA is the blueprint for your body. Your mitochondrial DNA, you can think of it kind of like a blueprint for energy production. Your mitochondrial DNA from your mother only. And this is exactly why, going to what you said, this is why some of these energy-related disorders, they follow from that maternal lines. Now, as far as the damage goes, or really inherited mutations go, some of those inherited mutations are linked to the diseases. Some of those inherited mutations are actually not life compatible, which means some of the pregnancy complications or early childhood deaths and so on are linked to mitochondrial disorders. Now, if you have more of predisposition or maybe light form of variant or perhaps damage because of what you inherited from your mom, and there are only 37 genes that you get from your mom, so there is not a lot of room for error there in comparison to the 20,000 genes. But mitochondrial DNA, if you already have that coming from your mom's side, you're more vulnerable because if they're not functioning well, they will contribute to insulin resistance, neurodegenerative disorders, including Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, especially cardiovascular disease, fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome. I see a number of individuals with chronic fatigue syndrome, and many of them are women who also have incredibly damage and cumulative damage on their DNA, which likely was a result of predisposition, what they got from their mothers, plus additional damage that happened through life. And this is not to say only women suffer through them. It's just that we suffer through them more frequently because, we got it from our mamas. So that's why I think your physician and your question is very well placed. Mitochondrial health, which many of us are not trained in, is central to longevity medicine. And longevity medicine is a whole field, the fastest growing field of medicine. It's not just biohacking trend. It's actually a field of medicine that has to do with how long we live in good health and so on. So I understand that I did not really answer your question productively there, but those are my thoughts.
No, it was good. Yeah, I think it was really good background on it. So like say someone goes through that, they had damage from their mom and their mitochondria. Like what can be done? Is there a lot that can be done to optimize it? Does epigenetics apply as well to the mitochondrial DNA?
So let's start from the beginning. So what can be done? A lot can be done. That's the wonderful thing about this, understanding early on and understanding the right kind of biomarkers really can make the difference in terms of, are you going to end up with that chronic disease that's going to shorten not only your health span, but also your lifespan? So we need to look at a number of different things, to be frank with you, to give you that guidance. So some of the things that I would say I would look at would be, what is the number of mitochondrial DNA copies? How many mutations are we identifying? What are the markers of mitochondrial efficiencies? I use some of the mitochondrial tests from my wonderful colleagues at the University of California in San Diego who do mitochondrial testing. So we actually assess also for markers of mitochondrial efficiency, oxidative stress markers, their ATP production, and so on, and all of this. What can be done? Well, it's a lengthy list, which depends on what I just said. What do you have? So overall approach would be you have certain supplements that can, if you know what else is going on inside of your cell, you can feed your mitochondria the right building blocks. So anything that maybe supports the TCA, which is the Krebs cycle, known as Krebs cycle, the elements that can support that, building blocks that can support that. And mitochondria, even if it's damaged, if you have the right number of building blocks, it can still continue to make that energy. Then you have supplements that directly can improve mitochondrial efficiency, like urolithin A. There are many of them, by the way, that are either trending in terms of the research that's being done right now or the research that's being translated so we can actually bring it into the clinical practice. And then I forget, what was the other question?
I think just like what can be done. And then also from like an epigenetic standpoint, everyone talks about epigenetics, and based upon your answer, right, epigenetics also can apply to mitochondrial DNA. It seems like because there's certain things you can do to improve this process and, function optimally.
Well, the good news with that is, so first of all, what is epigenetics? You can think of epigenetics as switches that turn your genes on or off. They kind of sit on top of your DNA. So I always say epigenetics is like a light switch or dimmer. Like if you have the light and you have a dimmer, that dimmer can be like up or down. So it kind of epigenetics controls that, like how much or strongly are your genes expressed. The good thing with that is even though mitochondria you get from your mom, most of mitochondrial proteins are actually encoded inside of your nuclear DNA. So
Hmm.
that means we need to still look at your nuclear DNA and look at those epigenetic changes that sit on top of your nuclear DNA because they will influence the mitochondrial protein production and also will influence that energy output.
Hmm.
How do epigenetics influence mitochondria? Well, you can look at DNA methylation. This is one of my foundational tests that I will do. In addition to metabolomics and microbiome, I will look at the DNA methylation to see how much are genes suppressed, those that are related to mitochondrial biogenesis, making of new mitochondria, especially, when you think about which organs are really mitochondria heavy, your brain, your heart, your muscles, your reproductive organs. And then I also will look at these epigenetic markers that can tell us is there a reduced expression of this oxidative phosphorylation proteins and also impaired ATP production. But those are some of the ways. And again, what moves the needle? Well, it can be anything from
Yeah.
exercise, fasting, cold exposure, even sauna, nutrient status, supplement status, stress is a very, very strong signaling factor here as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many levers that can be pulled, and I think one of the coolest things coming out is, and maybe you can speak to this, if
Mhm.
someone gets their genetic test, someone says it's horrible, right? You should be having all this disease. I've had certain genetics things that have popped up for myself that when you just take it in a vacuum can seem very depressing, and there's a lot of fear mongering, but it does seem, based on what you're saying, as we continue to learn, I'm sure there's gonna be more levers that we're going to be able to pull in 5 years and 10 years. I think with
100%.
technology coming out, I think, and you could probably speak to this eventually a little bit later on, but just how quickly we're learning on things that could be done. But what would you say, yeah, to who or a practitioner has a patient, it's like, oh man, their genetics are just they're quote unquote terrible, right? And then
Mhm,
you can get
mhm.
into that depressive state. Like what would you say to someone,
Yeah.
like that?
So I would say, again, what we discussed at the very beginning, you need to look at everything truly holistically. I just met with a client last week who came to see us because she wanted this multiomics approach. So, excuse me, she brought her genetic test results, and we're talking about pages of assessments. Most of the genetic testing companies also, especially if they're more in the direct to consumer realm, but also clinical ones, will not only test to see, but they also have some sort of a clinical decision support, meaning, okay, we found a variant, this is what it means, this is what you need to do. And
Mm,
so if you acted on that alone to say, oh my God, I have all of these variants, oh my goodness, I have all of these recommendations that I should act on. That is a very slippery slope. And I would
mm,
suggest for all of us to pause, take a deep breath and pause, and then think about, well, first of all, what else is going on in the body? So the first thing you want to look at are clinical biomarkers. This is also where I start. As much as we do all of this multiomic testing, I still am relying on those very standard validated clinical tests that I know. If you have A1C that's really elevated, obviously you have sugar, metabolism, response, cell insulin resistance issue. If your ApoB is elevated, we know you have cardiometabolic issue going on right now. So you can leverage those tested and tried clinical biomarkers. Then you meet the patient where they are. In other words, what symptoms do they have? Do those symptoms actually correlate to anything we found in their genetic tests? What
mm,
is their family history? And the reason I'm bringing up this patient or client from last week is she has a number of genetic variants indicating that she has, I don't know, cardiometabolic risk, maybe a risk of developing IBD, like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, or whatever else. Does she have them right now?
mm,
No, she doesn't. So therefore, does she need to be on all of those recommendations that we found? No. And the
mm.
reason is if we can optimize your metabolism, your gut especially, and these other, supportive, if you will, biomarkers or systems, hormones especially, stress reduction things, then your genes may be quieted down. So
Yeah.
I think this is probably more of what we already talked about, but that's where I
Yeah.
would start holistically.
No, I think it's good to have an example because it's like, okay, if your genetics were so messed up, you wouldn't be here, right? Like you're obviously still alive, and it's a potential predisposition, right? But I think what you said is so good, and just kind of stopping the fear mongering, but also just how can you be targeted, right? Like you're saying, and I've fallen into this category myself of, hey, I can do all the things, right? You tell me what to do, I'll do it. But again, is that best to take 20 different supplements and
Yes.
to target every single genetic issue, and you might not need to do that, and it might just be noise for your body to deal with.
Yes.
So one thing you mentioned, Dr. Kekic, earlier on was cellular intelligence. It's kind of an
Yes.
interesting term that I haven't really heard much of. So like, what does that mean practically?
Yeah. So this is my philosophy really to how I think about this. This is the framework that I have created over time. This is what I bring into my daily work right now. And I think I always attempted to do that. It's just that our tools were really limited in terms of what insights we're gaining. Cellular intelligence in action is my way of thinking what's happening inside of your body from this lens that I bring in. I am not a medical doctor. I am trained in pharmacology, nutrition, like these information bits that are going on through your body that your body does something with. And plus these information bits also will do something to your body. That's essentially what the whole science of pharmacology is based on. Pharmacokinetics, essentially what your body does to the drug or that information. Pharmacodynamics, what that information or the drug, supplement, whatever, does to your body. So, cellular intelligence in action means if we can understand what your cells inside of your cells are doing with the fuel that you're putting in, which is essentially the whole aspect of metabolomics. We go inside of your cell to say the supplement that you take, medication that you take, the nutritional elements, your diet essentially that you're eating, exercise and whatever else, how is that affecting inside of your cell? Because
Mm,
if that is off, it is going to translate into everything else from eventually ending up with these diseases and conditions like diabetes, four horsemen of death, diabetes, dementia, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. All of it starts inside of the cell. So if
mm,
we can understand what our cells are communicating, especially early on, and give them the right tools, the right medicines, the supplements, nutrients and practices, then we can course correct. Even if your genetics is indicative that you have high risk of diabetes, like I do, and my family members do, or cancer, like my family members do. It's not your destiny. Genes are not your destiny. There
yeah,
is a more recent longevity study. So there are many longevity studies, and longevity again is not like living up till you're 200 years old.
yeah.
Longevity is essentially more aligned with your health span and lifespan. But there's a newer longevity study that showed, maybe we were wrong about how we were thinking that the genes only contributed between, I don't know, 10 to 30% of longevity. What this study has found is almost 55%, but it
Wow.
comes with a big but. So
Mm,
if you take the confounders and then if you say with comparing those who had the right lifestyle versus those who did not, targeted interventions and so on, the genetics still plays small role. So that's I think the wonderful message that I think most of us can kind of walk with to say I'm in charge actually of what happens to me for the
yeah,
most part.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I saw the post that you did about that on LinkedIn, I believe, where
Yes.
that study came out 50 to 55%. And so obviously, everyone starts talking in the medical world and non-medical world about, and it's more of a doom and gloom, right? You're not in control, you can't do anything. Like you're just a product of your genetics and things outside of your control. And I think what you said in response to that very quickly, which I think it's good to get a hold of that conversation before it gets off the rails, right? Of, hey, yes, it's a massive but, like you said, like there are so many things you can do. And obviously, you hear stories of people that smoke cigarettes and they leave till they're 100 years old, right? Like that's probably the type of person that has good genetics longevity wise. So you can't change that per se, but there is so much you can do to change your genetics or not change your genetics, but, you know, bypass genetic potential bottlenecks, right? To really live that health span in combination with the lifespan. So one thing you said, I mean, you keep coming back to the personalization aspect.
Yeah.
Everyone is so unique, right? And so I know there's always going to be a role, maybe, for multivitamins, right? Just kind of
Mhm.
base nutrient needs that based upon the soil and food
Mhm.
currently that most people might be deficient in. It doesn't hurt to supplement.
Yeah.
But I guess how do you see that changing? Where do you see the role of set this one product for everyone versus why some don't work for some supplements work for others? Like, how do you see that progressing with the developments that we're seeing with medicine and in your clinical practice?
So it's a complex question that begs
Yeah,
maybe
a lot.
few. You serve me a full course, which I love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe three things that come to mind. Number one is the personalization aspect is really important. This is exactly what I have done as a pharmacist for the past over 20 years. And that is one thing that I do is when I see patients or clients come in, we looked at all of the things they're putting in their body. So all of the supplements, medicinal foods, nutraceuticals, and so on. Then the thinking hat goes on and we start going through, well, is it needed? Is it effective? For how long? How do you take it? What is it combined with? What other medications and foods can it interact with? Plus, also your biomarker data can it interact with, including your genetics, the microbiome, and all of these other data points. And then, of course, there is also an aspect of where you're at, meaning, is your gut able to even absorb the supplement that you're putting in? Which then brings me to my second point, and that is we're starting to see not only personalization part, meaning, do you need to take it? Is it safe for you? For how long you're going to do it? What's the dosage, formulation, and all of that in combination? But also, now we're starting to see supplements that are actually kind of walking hand in hand with ensuring that we're not just throwing stuff in that is going to end up damaging your microbiome. Your liver is a detoxifying organ that still needs to detox most
Yeah.
of the supplements, and so do your kidneys. And so now we're having, formulations like liposomal, formulations, maybe some of the powders, even though they're not palatable, perhaps it's an easier route. But also, I think it's important that we're minimizing the number of inactive ingredients that we're putting in those supplements that people, and I have people, Michael, who, when they come to see me, they bring a suitcase full of supplements. And I'm not joking. Like, it's not a bag, it's a suitcase full of
Yeah.
supplements. Can you imagine the impact that the little things and inactive ingredients and all of this actually plays, not to say active ingredients? And then the third part is the personalization is the key. And I think this is where most of us who are clinicians are still struggling with. And that is, how do we actually truly personalize this? What are we
Mm.
going to use as our levers to pull on, the biomarkers to fall back in? And also, who do we collaborate with? Is it going to be manufacturers, compounding pharmacies? Like, how do we do this?
Yeah, it's personalization is a word that's used a lot and it can mean so many different things, right? Like, it's like, hey, I do personalized medicine, right? You can go to a clinic online and it's like, okay, what does that mean? What's your approach to personalization? Like you said, it's just an ever evolving field, right? To
Mhm.
that. And so, yeah, no, that's really good. I obviously I want to be respectful of your time. You're very busy. You as everyone can tell based upon your clinical expertise here and everything you're sharing. I think it's been very fruitful and I could keep going forever, but I won't do that. But I guess, I know you're really well connected. You're always learning. You're
Mhm.
around a lot of bright minds. You really are on the leading edge and cutting edge of how we're really pushing the longevity conversation. So for you personally, like what are you most excited about right now as this work continues to evolve? And that could be a couple things, one thing, but I'm sure there's something that you're like, I love this right now. What is that for you?
I am a squirrel, so I love a lot of things. So, what I'm on a personal note, which is professional personal note, I am very enthused, motivated, and excited about our B2B arm. So, our company Futureome, we have B2C, which is we work with clients directly. We work also with concierge clinics to help their clients. But really, where I struggle with, and that's the solution that I want to create for us, but also for all of the other clinicians who want to do this right. Like our whole tagline is know your cells to know yourself. Well, how do you do that unless you have the right tools, the right protocols, the right really evidence-based approaches to this? Otherwise, it's just a marketing ploy. And so what I'm excited about is our B2B component, where we're now engaging in building out some of these solutions that I know we needed, or we still may actually need. So how do you communicate this to your patients and clients who will then act on that? Like
Yeah.
I'm building a product that's really for me, and that is, it's great. Data and biomarkers, all that is great. How does that change the needle for me? Do I know what I need to do? And then as a
Yeah.
clinician, how do I continue to engage with my clients that we not only follow trends, but we are integrating these emerging technologies? Like I just messaged a colleague on LinkedIn prior to our call because I noticed that her company has a sensor, the heart rate variability and other sensors that will go as an earring. I'm very
Wow.
involved in women's health. Our other
Yeah.
platform or first flagship product actually within Futureome is called Aurea, which is multi-omics based longevity for women. And so they have these sensors that look like jewelry. Look, I'm wearing a jewelry right
Yeah.
now. I want to
Yeah.
look great and I want to feel great and I
Yeah.
want things to be functional. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
excited about, not just sciencey bits.
That's cool. Yeah, it's I think that's what I was very impressed with about you when we first connected is, I reached out and there were some synergies in terms of being able to really personalize formulas with the approach that you were
Exactly.
taking, but I think just your willingness and openness to just keep learning, right? Like, I think sometimes in the industry you get some practitioners that are really set in their ways. I've had success with this, for the last 10 years, why would I change? And sometimes I kind of think internally, it's, the research is changing so substantially right now. The technology is advancing so much. You're doing people are doing the patients their disservice if they're not very open to new things and what's happening. And there could have been a study that came out, new technology that came out a month ago that could completely change how anyone does medicine, right? And with technology, that's happening faster and faster and
Yes.
faster. So yeah, I guess real quick, can you give a brief overview of Futureome? I know you mentioned it briefly and I mentioned at the start, but yeah, just kind of share what Futureome is, I guess the B2B and the B2C
Yes.
for others.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for giving us opportunity to mention it even. So Futureome is a concierge longevity company. We work mostly with high impact individuals who want to own their health. So executives, entrepreneurs, founders, but also athletes, both active athletes and retired athletes. We work both with men and with women. And what we do is really technical explanation would be we use multi-omics based approach to health. So anything from your genetics, the gut, microbiome, metabolome, and proteome, and all of these other elements, and also very advanced clinical biomarkers. So as we have that big data, we then leverage a different kind of technology that's AI based. It's called digital twin. So obviously the multi-omics testing creates big data. And that big data, we need to leverage that AI-based technology, again, called digital twin, that will make sense of two things. Number one, what's happening at this deeply molecular cellular level that can tell us not only what's happening in your body right now, but also give us a direction where you may end up years, 5, 10, 15 years from now if you continue that course. And number two is it allows us to personalize your lifestyle protocols. So my philosophy is also based on these 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine that I'm trained in. And that is 6 pillars would be nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, relational health, and substances, which includes obviously supplements, nutraceuticals, medications, peptides, exosomes, anything that's a substance, and of course, toxins and antitoxins. So that's the work on Futureome. Our first flagship product is called Aurea. I'm very proud of it. I built it for myself and my team members. Our first core team were all women, not because I hired women, it's just because it was a natural organic attraction. And
And
so Aurea is,
and women are smarter than men. You can say it.
I'm not sure that I can comment on that part. But I can tell you that we are not small men and we need solutions that are really created for us. And so
Yeah.
that's what we're doing with Aurea. And finally, I can maybe say that all of this seems like it's very exclusive, which it is. And I am very dedicated to bringing longevity in very democratized way where all of us should be having these conversations about how do I protect my number one business asset, which is my health? How do I
Mm.
protect my number one life asset, which is your health? And then how do I invest in it in a way that I'm actually owning it? And then when I have a conversation and I'm hiring my team members, they and I will have this very informed conversation about actually what's happening under the hood. And for this reason, Michael, I am going to be putting out, this is maybe an exclusive announcement that I'll be making on your
Oh, let's
podcast
go.
episode.
Yeah.
I'm going to be putting out, and we are going to be putting out content that will hopefully educate both folks, lay people, so non-medical folks and medical folks as far as how do you go about expanding health span through evidence-based strategies. So
That's
YouTube,
exciting.
podcast, Substack, and so on.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're already putting out great content. Like I even learn, we talk periodically, but I learn even, I follow you on LinkedIn, which that's the only social media platform I have, but you're always putting out great content there and consistent with it. But yeah, I think what you're speaking to of it seems like right now, a lot of this stuff is exclusive, right?
Mhm.
Like in order to get top of the line type of care, longevity care, like how do you see that progressing? Because I think, there's the person who doesn't have the finances, right?
Mhm.
Who struggling with health issues that can be easily corrected. Like, are you seeing a trend towards that becoming more available to the masses?
Yes, and that trend is already here. I can tell you that you probably may have experienced this yourself. Nowadays, you can get advanced, very advanced, actually, clinical biomarkers in direct to consumer way. I am not saying this is ideal because you still need to know what to do with that, but I think this
Mm.
is also changing. We have more empowerment of people who are really invested in their health. That's longevity. Longevity is not only about doing stem cells and gene therapies in future. And now exosomes are really hot topic, or maybe total plasma exchanges. Longevity is, do you have foundational elements? Are you
Yeah.
breeding? Do you have strong personal relationships? Because if you look at the blue zones around the world, I think one
Yeah.
thing is very obvious. We humans have evolved to eat variety of different foods. It can be
Yep.
animal-based products, it can be plant, it can be combined. But what we also have evolved with is strong social connections and meaning. That's
Yeah.
longevity, and that's
Yeah.
accessible to all of us. So most of these elements, to be very frank with you, are actually not going to be things that are going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to be practices and the way that you view yourself and protect your.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Yeah, it's, obviously, the healthy man has 99 goals, right? The unhealthy man has one, right? And so I think when you're talking about health being the number one asset for someone, I mean, it's completely true. And I think and I'm thankful for you pushing the bill. I think you're one of the people that's making a difference in the community that's sending out ripple effects, right? So just to make that possible for people to get better information and learn how to really truly optimize their health. So, obviously we want to thank you for that. Dr. Kekic, I guess as we kind of wrap up here, if someone's like, man, I love Dr. Kekic, she knows way more than I do. I'd love to learn from her, get connected with her. Like, how can someone follow your journey and kind of continue to stay in touch with you in that way?
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the support and kind comments, Michael. Right back to you with what you're doing with your podcast channel as well. I think that's going to change and improve lives. And that's what this is all about. So, briefly, how you follow me is you can engage with me on social media, Instagram, Dr. Adriana Kekic. On LinkedIn, if you're a medical professional, also find me under Dr. Adriana Kekic. But maybe what I'm really excited about is really our YouTube channel. We're going to be pushing out educational content, and that's going to be also my name, Longevity Guide with Dr. Adriana Kekic. So I hope I see you there. And for those nerds, science nerds like myself, if you want to go deep dive, I got your back. There is a Substack that you can join, and I really go into multiomics and protocols behind them, really sharing either my personal experience, but more importantly, clinical cases that I have.
Yeah, I would highly recommend following her. No, I think sometimes it's really hard to know, there's so much information coming out. Like, where do I go? How do I take all this information in? How do I apply it? How do I get the right information, the new research? I think Dr. Kekic is really involved there. And I think she's really onto something when it comes to how she's also presenting information. And so she's a great resource to learn those things and to have a good centralized point for everything that's coming out. 'Cause she is really on the cutting edge and she's always sharing that. So, Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kekic. It's been an absolute pleasure. I learned a ton. I'm sure it's going to be a huge benefit to other people. And, maybe we can have you back on at some point to kind of dive into some of these other things. But yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and I would love to come back, especially talk about supplements, one of my
Yeah,
favorite topics.
absolutely. Well, thank you. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you.